So you had no inkling that there was anything to do with Russia until the President of the United States basically declared it not only on TV, but in the Oval Office to the Russian foreign minister saying, the pressure's off now, I got rid of that nut job. That came to you as a complete surprise.
Well, all I can say is, Senator Reid, that our recommendation was put in writing, and I believe it was correct. And I believe the President valued it, but how he made his decision was his.
And you had
process.
no inkling that he was considering the Russian investigation?
Well, I'm not going to try to guess what I thought.
No, that's fair. There is a scenario in which this whole recapitulation of Clinton was a story, basically, a cover story that the President sort of tried to put out and that he quickly abandoned. And his real reason was a Russian investigation, which, if had been the case, I would suspect you, in principle, would have reclused yourself from any involvement. So, thank you.
Senator McCain.
Over the last few weeks, the administration has characterized your previously undisclosed meetings with Russian Ambassador Kislyak as meetings you took in your official capacity as a U.S. Senator and a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. As chairman of that committee, let me ask you a few questions about that. At these meetings, did you raise concerns about Russian invasion of Ukraine or annexation of Crimea?
I did, Senator McCain, and I would like to follow up a little bit on that. That's one of the meetings that's one of the issues that I recall explicitly. The day before my meeting with the Russian ambassador, I'd met with the Ukrainian ambassador, and I heard his concerns about Russia. And so I raised those with Mr. Kislyak, and he gave, as you can imagine, not 1 inch. Everything they did, the Russians had done, according to him, was correct. And I remember pushing back on it, and it was a bit testy on that subject.
Knowing you on the committee, I can't imagine that. Did you raise concerns about Russia's support for President Bashar Assad and his campaign of indiscriminate violence against his own citizens, including his use of chemical weapons?
I don't recall whether that was discussed or not.
You raised concerns about Russia's interference in our electoral process or its interference in the electoral processes of our allies?
I don't recall that being discussed.
At those meetings, if you spoke with Ambassador Kislyak in your capacity as a member of the Armed Services Committee, you presumably talked with him about Russia-related security issues that you have demonstrated as important to you as a member of the committee?
Did I discuss security issues?
I don't recall you as being particularly vocal on such issues.
Repeat that, Senator McCain. I'm sorry.
The whole Russia-related security issues that you demonstrate as important to you as a member of the committee. Did you raise those with him?
You mean such issues as nuclear issues, or?
Yeah, in other words, Russia-related security issues. In your capacity as the chairman of the Strategic Forces Subcommittee, what Russia-related security issues did you hold hearings on or otherwise demonstrate a keen interest in?
We may have discussed that. I just don't have a real recall of the meeting. I was not making a report about it to anyone. I just was basically willing to meet and see what he discussed.
And his response was?
I don't recall.
During the 2016 campaign season, do you have any contacts with any representative, including any American lobbyist or agent of any Russian company within or outside your capacity as a member of Congress or a member of the Armed Services Committee?
I don't believe so.
Politico recently reported that in the middle of the 2016 elections, the FBI found that Russian diplomats whose travel the State Department was supposed to track had gone missing. Some turned up wandering around the desert or driving around Kansas. Reportedly, intelligence sources conclude that after about a year of inattention, these movements indicate, one, that Moscow's espionage ground game has grown stronger and more brazen, and that quietly the Kremlin has been trying to map the United States telecommunications infrastructure. What do you know about this development and how the Justice Department and other relevant U.S. government agencies are responding to it?
We need to do more, Senator McCain. I am worried about it. We also see that from other nations with these kind of technological skills like China and some of the other nations that are penetrating our business interests, our national security interest. As a member of the Armed Services Committee, I did support and advocate, and I think you supported legislation that would, and it's ongoing now, that requires the Defense Department to identify weaknesses in our system and how we can fix them. But I would say to you, Senator McCain, that is, in my short tenure here in the Department of Justice, I've been more concerned about computer hacking and those issues than I was at in the Senate. It's an important issue. You're correct.
The Washington Post reported yesterday Russia has developed a cyber weapon that can disrupt the United States power grids and telecommunications infrastructure. This weapon is similar to what Russia or Russian allied hackers used to disrupt Ukraine's electrical grid in 2015. Can you discuss a little bit in open session how serious that is?
I don't believe I can discuss the technological issues, just to say that it is very disturbing that the Russians continue to push hostile actions in their foreign policy, and is not good for the United States or the world or Russia, in my opinion.
Do you believe we have a strategy in order to counter these ever-increasing threats to our national security and our way of life?
Not sufficiently. We do not have a sufficient strategy dealing with technological and IT penetrations of our system. I truly believe it's more important than I ever did before, and I appreciate your concern and leadership on that issue. And in fact, all of Congress is going to have to do better.
Senator's time's expired. Chair would recognize the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and General Sessions, thank you. I particularly appreciate your last comments with Senator McCain about the seriousness of this threat, and it's why so many of us on this committee are concerned when the whole question of Russian intervention, the President continues to refer to it as a witch hunt and fake news, and there doesn't seem to be a recognition of the seriousness of this threat. I share, I think most members do, the consensus that the Russians massively interfered. They want to continue to interfere, not to favor one party or another, but to favor their own interests. And it is of enormous concern that we have to hear from the administration how they're going to take that on. I also believe comments have been made here about where we head in terms of some of the Trump associates who may have had contacts with Russians. Candidly, we've not gotten to all of that yet because of the unprecedented firing of the FBI director that was leading this very same Russia investigation that superseded some of our activities. So those members who I hope will equally pursue the very troubling amount of smoke, at least, that's out there between individuals that were affiliated with the Trump campaign, possible ties with Russians. I've not reached any conclusion, but we've got to pursue that. Final comment, I understand your point, but you have to, there were a series of comments made by Mr. Comey last week. I think members on this side of the aisle have indicated understand executive privilege, understand classified setting. I do think we need, as Senator Reid indicated and Senator Harris and others, if there are these long-standing written procedures about this ability to have some other category to protect the conversations with the president, we'd like to get a look at them, because we need to find out, in light of some of the contradictions between today and last week, where this all heads. At the end of the day, this is not only, let me restate what I said the last time, this is not about relitigating 2016. It is about finding out what happened, about some of the serious allegations about potential ties, but on a going forward basis, making sure that the Russians who are not finished in terms of their activities didn't end in the election day in 2016. We know that is ongoing, and we have to be better prepared on a going forward basis. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, one brief comment, if you mind. I do want to say that a change at the top of the FBI should have no impact whatsoever on the investigation. Those teams have been working, and they'll continue to work, and they've not been altered in any way.
But there were a number of very strange comments that Mr. Comey testified last week that you could have, I believe, shed some light on. But we'll continue. Thank you, sir.
General Sessions, thank you again for your willingness to be here. Not sure that you knew it, but your replacement sat through most of this hearing, Luther Strange. He's made us regret that we don't have intramural basketball teams in 6'9".
Big Luther is a good round ball player at Tulane.
You've been asked a wide range of questions, and I think you've answered things related to claims about the meeting at the Mayflower. You've answered questions that surround the reasons of your recusal and the fact that you had never been briefed since day one on the investigation, that you made clear that you can't think of any other conversations that you've had with Russian officials. You've covered in detail the conversation that you had, though brief, with Director Comey that he referenced to after his private meeting with the president, just to name a few things that I think you've helped us to clear up. There were several questions that you chose not to answer because of confidentiality with the president. I would only ask you now to go back and work with the White House to see if there are any areas of questions that they feel comfortable with you answering, and if they do, that you provide those answers in writing to the committee. I would also be remiss if I didn't remind you that those documents that you can provide for the committee, they would be helpful to us for the purposes of sorting timelines out. Anything that substantiates your testimony today, individuals who might have been at events that you're familiar with, especially those that worked for you, would be extremely helpful. And more importantly, I want to thank you for your agreement to have a continuing dialogue with us as we might need to ask some additional questions as we go a little further down the investigation. That certainly does not have to be a public hearing, but it may be an exchange and a dialogue that we have. You have helped us tremendously, and we're grateful to you and to Mary for the unbelievable sacrifice that you made in this institution, but also now in this administration. This hearing is now adjourned.
Thank you.